My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President for Educational Programs for Performative, the online community and resource for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Over 350 users strong now and growing. First, I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar entitled Recurring Revenue Management, Maximizing the Potential of Your Recurring Revenue Streams. Recurring revenue is all around us. There isn't a software or content company out there who isn't at least thinking about a subscription service of some sort to augment or flat out replace their traditional revenue model. And the marketplace, from consumer to enterprise, is growing accustomed to and indeed starting to simply expect subscription options. Being able to take advantage of this trend could be the difference between leading and following in your industry. Today we are going to learn about this topic from companies that live this model day in and day out, NetSuite and adaptive planning. Today we will learn lessons about what to look for and how to manage recurring revenue streams so that we can be better prepared to take up this mantle at our companies. I would like to thank our sponsors, NetSuite and Adaptive Planning, who have made it possible for Performative to bring you this program free of charge, like all Performative events and everything on our website. We want this to be an interactive experience for you, so in addition to the presentation, the speakers will be fielding questions from you, our listeners today. So if you have questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send them to us. We can't promise to get to all of them in because there's so much to cover in such a short period of time, but we will do our best. Whatever we do not get to, we will ask the speakers to address in our online community to which you are all invited. We will be sending out soft copies of today's presentation to all attendees, and for those who requested CPE credits, those certificates will be emailed to you. Before we get to today's first speaker, I would like to remind you to ask any questions you have at any time via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will attack those questions after the presentation. I would like to introduce today's first speaker, Ranga Bodla. Ranga Bodla is the Director of Software Vertical Marketing at NetSuite. He has more than 15 years of product management and marketing experience in the software and technology industry. In his role at NetSuite, Ranga is chartered with delivering the next generation of software to power tomorrow's software leaders and innovators. Prior to joining NetSuite, Ranga led worldwide governance, risk, and compliance marketing at SAP and led efforts to establish them as a leader and visionary in the space. Prior to this, Ranga held positions at Pilot Software, Hyperion Solution, and IBM's WebSphere. Ranga has a BS in engineering from Trinity University in San Antonio. Ranga?
Good morning, and thank you, Ernie, for that brief introduction. I'm glad to be speaking to all of you today on what I consider to be a pretty interesting topic. As Ernie mentioned, recurring revenue is obviously a hugely important topic, and there's a fairly large change happening on the landscape. I mean, I'll talk more about this as I go through the presentation, but really for my portion of the presentation, I really have kind of three key things I want to kind of go through. Just talk a little bit about the changing nature of revenues themselves. So talk a little bit about what we've seen. Kind of reiterate what you probably all know as consumers and business folks. Second, talk about just the multiple kinds of recurring revenue. I think it's important to kind of talk a little bit about how much revenue has changed and all those different types. And then lastly, talk about what we've learned ourselves in terms of managing our own company, in terms of managing recurring revenue and things that we've found that are useful. Then I'll turn it over to the other speaker for today, Tracy from Adaptive Planning, and then I'll come back at the end for question and answer. So with that, let me just dive right in. And really to start off, what I'd like to talk about is this idea of the shifting landscape. Obviously, you're all consumers in addition to your day job, and so you're seeing this just in your everyday world. However, I just want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about how, and just kind of reiterate some of these different pieces. One of the things is there's a confluence of factors that's changing how we consume information. I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago the iPad would be as popular as it is? But what it has resulted in is you're seeing these recurring revenue models becoming more pervasive because of how we are starting to consume and consuming content today. As one example, it was just a few years ago, it wasn't very long ago that if you wanted digital TV shows, the only way to really get them was this weird combination of recording them somehow online and then converting them to something else and then downloading them to your device. It was really very difficult to get content, whether legally or illegally for that matter. And really Apple and Disney really said, we need to figure out a way to monetize this content and get customers, allow customers to more easily get this. And what you've seen obviously is Apple closing a deal with Disney, renting ABC shows, downloading ABC shows, and obviously this has expanded quite more than just ABC as an example. But I think the key thing here is that very different change in model there. Or what about the publishing industry, where more and more you're seeing these different models emerge, and publishers are trying to figure out, do we go through the Apple model, do we go through another model that we can, so we don't have that 30% cut. But the big thing is, there are companies like Issue that's you see here on the slide here, and they're helping companies of all sizes be able to deliver and monetize their content digitally, creating literally a whole different revenue stream. So you might have your existing revenue stream, but they might be creating a whole different one as well. Or Roku, I like this one as well. When this thing first came out, it made it easy to get Netflix content on your TV. But now they're branching out to enable you to get content from a lot of different sources, whether it's Pandora or other things that stream information. But today it's pretty simple. You pay a price and you get this object. But as they've moved past just Netflix, they've become another channel to enabling all these other content streams to your TV. So some of these which cost money, and of course some that don't. Now, of course, the key thing to really take away from this previous slide is that revenue is changing, and it's coming in many different flavors. We've just gone through a few of those examples, but as this slide shows, companies today have the opportunity to monetize revenue in very different ways than was possible just even, say, 5 years ago, as an example. Because of the changes in technology, it is also makes it easier for very small organizations to be able to get these new revenue streams, or as well as large organizations as well. And I'll talk about a few of those examples in my presentation. Now, depending on your business type, there are many types of different revenue, and it's important to realize that each of these will impact what you need to do as an organization. Obviously, that's not new news to anyone on this call here, but what I want to make sure I bring across is that oftentimes the systems themselves can prevent the flexibility needed to change your business or launch new revenue streams. And it's important that your system be flexible enough to customize and easy enough to suit your billing needs. Now, as an organization where recurring revenue is really key to almost everything that we do, one of the things that we realize is that building an effective subscription business it's not just about finance. That's oftentimes a mistake that's made, is that's just finance's issue, that's just finance's problem, let them deal with it. There's a lot of different business considerations as well as systems considerations that have to be in place to really effectively build a new or successful subscription business. And I can't understate the importance of making sure all those pieces are considered as you're thinking about a subscription business. You have to consider the impacts on finance, sales, marketing, product, and services. And understanding how all of these elements relate to each other is critical to managing a successful subscription business. One of the biggest things around this is managing the metrics and value of how these things interrelate to each other. Success in this really requires a cross-functional, real-time focus on customer metrics, satisfaction, the ranking of your most important customers, reference levels, and much, much more. And while that's always been important, it becomes even more critical in a recurring or subscription business. Having a strong process enables everyone to monitor and collaborate on those key customers and the renewals and prioritize accordingly. A second area in this is also the whole area of billing and revenue recognition. And I'll talk about some of the examples we've learned from our own business. But when you talk about billing complexity in a subscription business, it becomes much more complex than if you're just talking about an annual, you bill one customer right up front in a perpetual model, and then you're done. Billing complexity in a recurring revenue business can get more complex, and obviously in terms of the back end and how those things, the downstream effects. Third is the area of usage of client management. Driving renewals and having that part of the business requires a strong client management aspect to your business. And obviously, depending on your business, could be more high touch or it could be low touch, depending. But it does require touches across services, sales, and support. You need to understand all across customer history, understanding the issues that a customer might be having with your product, And all of those are important to improve the stickiness with the solution. Upsell and renewal management. I mean, driving additional margin is particularly important in a recurring business, and an upsell can drive revenue for years to come. One of the things that I think is critical is in a SaaS or a recurring revenue business, a dollar of revenue is in fact look very different than a dollar of revenue in a perpetual license business, and that is because over time that can be much more important. And your sales team has to be incented differently to upsell and renew because of how that model works. If you look, though, and the last piece I'll bring up on this slide is really, for SaaS licenses, almost all revenue is recurring, and that's really a critical thing. Whereas a perpetual license company, maintenance is still a critical annuity, but maybe not as relevant. But as Ernie brought up in his introduction, thinking about this as a potential new revenue stream is really important in terms of all those effects. Now, just understanding recurring revenue is one piece, but when you look at trying to manage recurring revenue effectively, and as we talk to our prospects and we talk managing our own business, there's a lot of different challenges that come with managing an effective recurring revenue business. One is revenue leakage. The loss of revenue from existing customers, because the process of a recurring revenue can touch so many different parts of the business. It can cause a lot of pain as many of the systems are not well integrated, if at all. So often the functions of contract management, billing, and revenue are often completely separated from each other, and that causes manual interactions to occur at each step of the process. We often find that companies are dedicating one or more full-time people just to the administrative aspects of managing the recurring revenue business. And this lack of process doesn't allow them to focus on how do we optimize that process, but rather how do we just keep the business running. And that can result in challenges, again, like I said, across revenue leakage, across customer churn and losing customers due to dissatisfaction, failure to effectively take advantage of upsell opportunities, billing inefficiencies, as well as revenue recognition. The bane of oftentimes the finance side of the house, where you end up having to manage any number of different spreadsheets to manage the revenue across these different myriad processes. Now, for us as a business, NetSuite itself, recurring revenue is our business. I talked previously about SaaS models as examples. I don't know if you know NetSuite. As a quick introduction, we are a SaaS company, and for us, driving our business, recurring revenue is critical. If we're not able to drive and grow our recurring revenue business, that is all there is really to our business. When we look at something like professional services, we really consider that a break-even business. That's something we obviously report to publicly. When we talk about our growth, it's about growing our top line and bottom line recurring revenue business, because that's really what drives us as a business, as we provide a cloud ERP suite that goes across that and driving that on a recurring basis. So what I'd like to do in the next set of slides really is talk about how our business and what we've learned about growing this particular business, because it is everything around everything we do. So when we look at our business itself and what we've learned from our own customers, through a lot of our own growing pains, we've been around since 1998, working with over 10,000 organizations. We've learned a lot of things. And what I've tried to do on this slide is really summarize some of the key learnings that we've kind of gotten across this recurring revenue aspect. The first, knowing your customer. Second, capitalize on your customer annuity. Third, simplifying the renewal process. Fourth, ensuring proper revenue recognition. And fifth is automating the transaction process. And we'll talk about each of these in more detail. But in understanding all of these pieces, hopefully it'll make it clear how we're optimizing our business. So probably this first one is one of the most critical, and that is knowing your customer. If you don't understand your customer, how can you effectively prioritize renewals and ensure you're focused on the right customers? Now, obviously, that's always been critical, but I think it becomes even much more important in a recurring revenue business, because you're constantly you need to make sure that your customers are happy on a not just on a the first time you sell them and then when you're trying to get your maintenance contract, but there's constant renewals and you have to, in some ways, almost resell someone over the entire lifetime of the customer. Now, we've developed our own approach to this here at NetSuite. We refer to it as SuiteRank. Essentially, it's a ranking that enables everybody to get on the same page, executives, sales, client management, support, to identify and monitor the most critical customers. And we use this in conjunction with understanding likelihood of renewal, just simple of A, B, or C as an example. But the key is the combination of these two measures enables us to quickly identify the most important customers that are most at risk of renewing and focusing resources as necessary. We don't want this to come up right at the renewal period, but rather if there's an issue that happens halfway through, we want to understand that. And if they're a critical customer, we need to make sure that we're putting in the right resources way in advance so that customer is happy. We view driving a customer measure like SuiteRank as critical for driving our business, and it means collecting data from across our multiple business functions to calculate that. And we calculate information from finance, recurring gap and profitability, from client management around reference level, from marketing around the vertical, customer satisfaction information from support, and we put all this information in a single source to make it really easy to calculate and make it more usable. But we've also tried to make sure that this is part of everybody's daily job, and we take SuiteRank and make it on everyone's dashboard so that with their day-to-day tasks, it makes renewal management part of their everyday job. The second piece of this really is capitalizing on your customer annuity. And we found this to really be a critical piece of managing our recurring business effectively. It's not just about getting new customers, but if you can reduce churn and you can maximize that renewal business, then every new customer you're getting is just growing your top line. And of course those existing customers are growing your bottom line. So if all your resources are constantly focused on just getting new business, then obviously you're losing out on those customers as you go, and the business isn't growing, and as well you're leaving money on the table. So one of the big things with this principle that we've found is ensuring we've built in pricing flexibility. As we all know, things change, markets change. The markets continually change on a regular basis as we look at the stock market these days. The industry changes, and you want to make sure you've allowed flexibility in your pricing, but also in your process to enable changes as things happen. The second part of this, though, is also effectively managing the upsell and the cross-sell aspect, needing to make sure that you're monitoring that upsell and downsell to ensure you're not leaving money on the table. At NetSuite, we use our own software to monitor upsell and downsell at a strategic level, as well as manage it at an operational level. We use our software to help monitor upsell and downsell, and then at the executive dashboard level, our executives can monitor customers that are upgrading service and downgrading service to understand what are the characteristics that are causing that. It helps provide us a real-time view into the opportunities that then we use that to drive, are there risks to the forecast? Are there things that we need to change? Do we need to make small steps? But rather than doing that on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis after the fact, we're making small tweaks as we go to make sure that we're ahead of it. We don't want surprises, and that's really a key thing that we try to drive in our business. For sales teams, though, that are compensated based on this upsell as well, the other key thing is understanding what's your cost to serve. If you truly don't understand what it costs to serve your customers, it becomes difficult to make intelligent decisions about investments in customers, and making the right decisions there. The third piece of this is simplifying the renewal process. There's really a simple diagram here which talks about in a recurring revenue business where you might have multiple upsells with a given customer. You might sell them something in December, you might sell them something in June, and you might sell them something in November. But rather than, the next year comes around, rather than taking that, and again in December, renewing that one piece, then in June renewing another piece, and then renewing another piece in November, we believe that for us the critical thing is wrap all that together so that when you bring them back again to the first renewal, that you've simplified all that so they're really looking at it with one bill. I mean, as consumers, we even know this, right? We'd rather not get 3 bills from a single company. We'd rather get one bill that says, oh, these are all the things I purchased. Let's get this upsold and renew that, or not renew it, as the case might be. And we think that helps improve things both from an efficiency standpoint, but also from a customer satisfaction point. And different companies have different philosophies on this, but this is one of the things that we've learned and we believe is key to our business. The fourth and I think also an important area is this area of revenue recognition. Oftentimes the bane of the finance department. One of the big things in a recurring revenue business, revenue recognition can become much more complex. And because it depends on the activities of every department, it's important to understand all the potential impacts to revenue recognition. When you are managing recurring revenue, this revenue recognition is critical. There's already new rules there. There's new exposure drafts coming. But it's important to understand all of these pieces because sometimes it can involve upsell, which involves a different part of the business, require a different schedule. And oftentimes this can lead to more spreadsheets to manage the process. And the key thing is managing this effectively is you want to understand all the potential impacts, and you take the same care with recurring revenue that you do with initial contracts. So ensure less pain later, or even worse, a restatement, of course. It's even more critical for SaaS companies where the notion of service is part of what you deliver. As I've said, and it's all of these different activities can impact revenue recognition, and it's important to consider each of the steps and say, where does revenue recognition impact us, and then understanding how are we appropriately dealing with this. And I know that as we were taking, for example, and looking at EITF and understanding and adopting those new rules, we had to look at each one of these pieces. How does it change? How's our services business and how we're compensating our sales team and how they're delivering and reporting on that? How is that affecting our revenue recognition? How are we affected in terms of delivering services? What's the effect of discount on future renewals, and how is that affecting revenue recognition? It's really important that each of these steps are taken into consideration and are critical for managing the business. So last but not least is, of course, then automation of the transaction process. I have to tell you the biggest thing that we've learned in managing all these pieces is the automation of this. We tie all of this together for ourselves. All the way from the quote process to the billing, the invoice, the revenue recognition, all the way to the renewal process. And it's one of the critical things for us that's allowed us to simplify and really manage our business more efficiently. But the key thing here, I'm not trying to give you a sales pitch, but rather I want to bring across to you is making sure all of this information is driven together in a single repository. Having that single customer record across finance, sales, and marketing is key to really driving a recurring revenue business and driving it effectively. You can start off and drive this just from the beginning without having this really underway, but as you really grow your business, not having all of this into that single repository can really impact and affect how the business is driven. So just to summarize, we've really taken all of these 5 steps and really we take it to heart when we, in our business. We really focus on understanding who our customer is, capitalizing on that customer annuity because it's critical for growing both top line and bottom line, simplifying the renewal process to make it streamlined on our customers, ensuring proper revenue recognition and making sure that we're taking into account how does the revenue recognition side of it affect our business. And last but not least, automating the transaction process to make it as simple as possible so that we can focus on the business side of it and growing the business and not on the administrative aspects of managing all these different pieces together. So with that, what I want to do is, I have one last item I also wanted to bring up, which is it's another customer example that I think might be useful as well, and that is KANA Software, which is another customer of NetSuite that we work with closely. Here's a company that I think very successfully had started in a perpetual business and started launching a subscription business as well. And one of the key things for them is if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, these are all the ways in which they're getting revenue from customers. Across license, they have both perpetual and subscription. Across professional services, both fixed fee and time and materials. Across managed services, both the subscription hosting services as well as perpetual software licenses. across educational services, course-based fees, and training credits. And then maintenance and support, where they have both periodic or annual contracts. And really the key thing for them is, for their customers, they wanted to be able to offer both deployment and pricing models that meet the requirements and needs of their customers. And they've really driven across all of these different areas. I think Ernie brought this up at the beginning, and I'll reinforce it here, here's an example where a customer had started with one model. They really used the opportunity to grow and add another model rather than replacing their model, because that's what they saw. Now, obviously, it's going to be different for every company. In some cases, you've got new startups that are just going to start from scratch and build a subscription business, and that's the only thing they do, similar to what we've done here at NetSuite. You may have other businesses which have a perpetual business, and they really want to launch this as a new line of business. Regardless of which part you may be in your organization, I think the important thing is to consider who are your key buyers and what impact that's going to have. What impact that's going to have on the revenue that you have coming in the door. It's going to be very different in a subscription business than a perpetual license business. And then what does that mean for your infrastructure and expertise that you need in your business? Because it is important to make sure that you're thinking about that systems consideration, because the downstream effects of managing this should not be underestimated. So with that, I'll conclude my portion of the presentation and really turn it over to back to Ernie and to Tracy to talk about adaptive planning and the FP&A perspective of recurring revenue. Ernie?
Oh, thank you very much, Ranga. That was extremely useful information and some really insightful information in how to optimize recurring revenue. With that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Tracy Schreiber, Director of Product Marketing, Adaptive Planning. Tracy has been with Adaptive Planning for the past 6 years in various roles, including several years dedicated to customer implementations. Prior to Adaptive Planning, she had a long career in the corporate finance world, including controllership positions in both large companies like Oracle and small startups. Tracy?
Thanks, Ernie and Ranga. I know Ranga said that recurring revenue is not just a finance issue, and he's right, but I'm on the finance side of the house. So today I'm going to be talking about recurring revenue from an FP&A, financial planning and analysis perspective. To frame the discussion today, I'd like to start with some recent survey data. This slide comes from a quarterly survey that we conduct together with the Business Performance Innovation Network to get finance professionals' perspectives on overall economic conditions, the performance of their specific companies, and their current financial management practices. In December of 2010, one of the questions we asked was, what are the top 3 challenges or pains that you would like to address in 2011? And what you can see is that, not surprisingly, finance professionals have a lot on their plates. They're concerned with both efficiency, streamlining processes, as well as effectiveness, making better business decisions. But the top 3 concerns include revenue management and growth and revenue planning and forecasting. Managing, planning, and forecasting revenue is hard enough, but it's even more complicated for companies with recurring revenue or that recognize a stream of revenue over time. And this comes from a survey of software CEOs and CFOs that was conducted by the Sandhill Group in March and April of this year. And once again, the top financial challenge for the next 12 months, by a pretty wide margin, is being able to do quick and accurate revenue planning and forecasting. So all this probably doesn't surprise anyone on the phone, but it's helpful to see compelling data from 2 different surveys conducted over the last few months, both of which point to an overwhelming interest in quick and accurate revenue planning. So that's what I'm going to talk through today, how you can tackle the challenge of managing, planning, and forecasting revenue, particularly recurring revenue, and in so doing, how you can create tremendous value for your organization. And I think the key is to really view this challenge not as an independent issue to be addressed, but as part of a broader, more comprehensive and continuous performance management cycle. Now, the easiest way to think of this cycle is to start with the annual budgeting and planning process, in which you establish your revenue and expense plans, as well as key financial and operating metrics for the next fiscal year. The next step is executing against that plan and monitoring actual performance against your plans. Then, based on the results, you perform analysis and produce reports at various levels, management reports, board reports, SEC reports, and so forth. And then based upon performance, start the cycle over again with replanning, reforecasting, or what-if analysis. Now, I'm sure the stages of this cycle are intimately familiar to everyone on the phone, But what might not be so familiar is managing this as a truly integrated and automated cycle, a cycle that has tight collaboration among managers throughout the organization, as well as tight integration between the systems involved in the process, particularly between the GL, your CRM system, and your software used for planning, reporting, and analysis. Companies and organizations that do have strong participation from managers throughout the organization and that have tightly integrated processes in which data flows seamlessly between systems can really get a tremendous amount of value out of their FP&A processes. They can identify potential issues more quickly, make better informed decisions also more quickly, and can then make course corrections with greater agility. In short, they can operate as world-class organizations that use their FP&A processes as business management tools that give them a real competitive advantage over their rivals. So what's keeping companies from getting to that world-class standard? Well, in our quarterly survey, we've also asked whether spreadsheets were the primary technology for managing budgeting and planning processes, and found out that they are for about 2/3 of companies. It's slightly higher than this for small and mid-sized companies and slightly lower than this for large companies. And as we'll discuss throughout the presentation, given this spreadsheet-based approach, it's no surprise that finance organizations have so many planning, forecasting, and reporting issues among their top challenges. Okay, so with that in mind as context, the key question is, what best practices can you adopt to help you create more value from your FP&A processes? I'm going to talk through 3 categories of best practices, and I think what you'll see is that the best practices that I discuss will center around one key change, moving out of spreadsheets and into a best-of-breed performance management solution. First, you need to find ways to cut down on the time and cost of each budgeting, forecasting, and reporting cycle. By replacing spreadsheets with a purpose-built application, such as adaptive planning, you can reduce your cycle time by as much as 60 to 90%. These applications automate consolidations, they enable you to build driver-based financial models, and they include purpose-built functionality for spreading revenue and invoicing over time. Our application includes specific capabilities designed to allow companies like ours, a software as a service company, to automate planning of revenue recognition, deferred revenue, and accounts receivable based on various dimensions and patterns. I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So all told, the time savings with these applications can be phenomenal, and that's in addition to improving the quality of decisions through better and more accurate information. The second category of best practices is to create a single version of the truth. It's important that everyone is working off the same set of numbers, so it's extremely helpful to be able to centralize all data, both actual and planned, into a single underlying database. This integration can be extremely tedious with spreadsheets, but it can be accomplished very quickly using the integration tools of an application like adaptive planning. These tools can connect to your GL, CRM, and other systems and make this process virtually seamless, allowing actual data to be used for planning, reporting, and analysis. And the third category of best practices is to improve overall alignment, participation, and collaboration throughout the organization. You need to empower and enable your management team so that each person truly owns his or her piece of the budget or forecast. By integrating processes and data and by engaging a broad group of participants in real time, you can ensure that your management team is continuously aligned, even as changes occur within the business environment in your organization. So those are the 3 categories of best practice that fit within the integrated performance management cycle. The takeaway here is that if you have access to a purpose-built application that includes functionality to automate planning of revenue recognition, and if managers throughout your organization can get quick and easy access to real-time data and web-based reports, then your overall organization can be much more nimble in understanding the state of your business, in making informed decisions, and then in taking action. I've talked about how achieving these best practices isn't possible with spreadsheet-based planning, but there are other challenges as well in revenue planning. Sales forecasts are not very accurate. We've looked at how forecast accuracy changes based on how far you are from the close of the period. And as you can see from this chart, there's a predictable decrease in forecast accuracy as the amount of time prior to the end of the period increases. As you can see, the average forecast accuracy decreases from 83% 1 month prior to close to 69% accuracy 12 months prior to close. But I think what's most surprising here is not that decrease, but the absolute level of forecast accuracy being as low as it is. A full 45% of companies came in under their revenue plan, while only 26% exceeded it. And obviously, if you're reasonably far off in terms of your revenue planning and forecasting, you simply can't run a tight ship, and you end up deploying resources inefficiently. You make investments that you shouldn't, or you hold off on taking actions that you should, or you give inaccurate guidance. It can be a real problem. Why is that? Well, there's a variety of reasons, but one of the primary issues is the underlying technologies, which tend to be CRM systems coupled with spreadsheets. Many companies use CRM or similar applications to manage their sales opportunities and create forecasts based on the expected value for each opportunity in the pipeline. And that's a time-tested approach. CRM systems do a great job with this, but it's not enough for several different reasons. First of all, there are no revenue recognition modeling capabilities in CRM systems. This is a real showstopper for companies that spread revenue over time in different and usually complex revenue streams. These CRM systems have no modeling capabilities at all, much less the ability to forecast revenue streams. Also, there typically aren't ways to do top-level adjustments. There's no ways for sales VPs or VPs of finance to make overlay adjustments to probability assumptions or deal sizes without changing the underlying data. And CRM systems are limited to short-term views. They do a great job of compiling opportunities over the next 3, 6, 9, or even 12 months, but that's about it. And then finally, CRM systems are great at giving you a real-time, up-to-the-minute view of your pipeline, but it's very hard to understand how the pipeline has changed over time. And then, as a result of these shortcomings, sales and finance teams typically augment their CRM systems with spreadsheets, but that just introduces a new set of challenges. Spreadsheet-based processes are manual, particularly when it comes to modeling revenue streams, deferred revenue, and invoicing behavior that affects accounts receivable. And consolidations are slow and error-prone, there's no version control, and spreadsheets are inherently non-collaborative. But despite all of these challenges, over 80% of companies are using CRM systems and spreadsheets as the underlying technologies for creating sales forecasts. And as you can see from the chart on the right, those using automated planning applications together with their CRM systems are predominantly larger companies. And that results in a big missed opportunity, because we also see that companies that do use automated planning systems simply produce more accurate forecasts. Here you can see that whether it's 3 months prior to the end of the period, 6 months prior, or a year prior, companies using automated planning systems, those represented by the blue lines, create more accurate forecasts than those using spreadsheets and CRM systems, which are represented by the red lines. So with this as a backdrop, then, the question is, what best practices can you adopt to improve your sales planning and analysis? In terms of sales planning best practices, first you need a way to automate revenue recognition for planned bookings that will be spread over time. I've mentioned that CRM systems don't have tools for this, and trying to calculate this in spreadsheets just isn't very workable. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Next, you should use historical close rates and standardized top-down adjustment methodologies used by both sales and finance. These adjustments should be transparent so that you can learn how accurate the adjustments are and improve the approach over time. You need to combine both bottom-up and top-down modeling. The best practice is to combine both bottom-up data with top-level adjustments in the short term and with driver-based top-down assumptions as you look further out. You should be able to reforecast frequently so that you have the most up-to-date data available. And as we all know, deals can change very rapidly. And then finally, you should ideally integrate your sales forecast directly into your financial plan so that it can be used not only to understand the revenue picture, but also how that flows through the rest of your financial statements so that you can see the full impact on the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. And obviously, as we discussed before, nearly all these best practices are challenging to accomplish if you're just using a CRM application and spreadsheets. However, they can be quite easy to do if you're using an automated sales planning application. This is a graphical depiction of what I just described. The Complete Performance Management solution allows you to integrate sales planning detail from your CRM or other sales planning system, then automatically integrate it with your sales planning model. There, you can take the detailed forecast by opportunity and apply revenue and invoicing patterns to the data, add management adjustments, and keep a history of changes over time. Then you can also automatically integrate this revenue plan with your corporate planning model, where you have a full set of integrated financial statements. Now, given that overview of integrated corporate management, let's focus on one specific component of that. How do you automate the planning of recurring revenue? Whether you're bringing data in from your CRM system or creating your sales forecast from scratch within your planning application, the starting point is bookings. Salespeople forecast bookings or new business, not revenue recognition. If you want your plan to include an integrated set of financial statements, meaning P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow, you need to translate the bookings forecast into revenue stream, invoicing, and deferred billed revenue, and sometimes even unbilled but recognized revenue. What you need is a purpose-built planning application like Adaptive Planning that contains built-in functionality for this purpose. These applications allow you to aggregate data based on characteristics such as contract date, contract type, including subscriptions, licenses, maintenance, professional services, and so forth, revenue recognition pattern, and invoicing pattern. Even better, the application should provide ways of associating revenue recognition and invoicing patterns with specific contract types. And the invoicing pattern should be allowed to be different from the revenue pattern. The revenue and invoicing patterns should be flexible. For example, revenue spread over 12 months but invoiced up front, or revenue spread over 25 months with a 1-month delay, or revenue driven by key milestones over the life of the contract. And all of this should be easily created, modified, and maintained by finance. This way, sales planners can focus on their plan for bringing new business in the door, and finance has an efficient tool for spreading that business over time appropriately. Driving the results of these values spread over time into an integrated set of financial statements can be a complicated dance. Your planning application should help you automate this. Your P&L will be impacted both by the future revenue stream of new forecasted bookings and by revenue from previously deferred revenue. These two need to be forecasted separately. And the balance sheet is impacted in multiple ways. First of all, deferred revenue is made up of previously deferred revenue and changes in new deferred revenue from new forecasted bookings. You need to keep those components separate too and make sure that their changes tie to the corresponding changes in revenue on the P&L. And then you have accounts receivable. Just like with deferred revenue, your planned AR has two components. AR balances on the books when your planning period starts, and new AR activity driven by forecasted invoicing and collection patterns. And thirdly, you may have unbilled revenue on your balance sheet, or revenue that is recognized before it's invoiced. This isn't as common as deferred revenue, but I have seen it. Like with deferred revenue and accounts receivable, you need to consider what's on the balance sheet when your planning period starts, plus new activity from forecasted new business. This is a lot to keep track of. If you're trying to plan all this in spreadsheets, you're probably glossing over a lot of this. Most of the time, companies that plan in spreadsheets just swag this by forecasting revenue and ending deferred revenue and AR balances based on historical trends. And that can be wildly inaccurate. If forecasting cash flow is important to you, methods like that just aren't enough. Those methods might be adequate if your business is consistent and doesn't change much over time. But if your company is subject to significant seasonality, or if your new business comes in the form of large, infrequent contracts, these methods fall especially short. Purpose-built planning applications like Adaptive Planning have built-in functionality which greatly facilitates this kind of forecasting. They have unlimited custom dimensions that you can use to categorize data by characteristics such as customer, product, contract type, and so forth. And they have lookup tables designed to spread value